Everyone, welcome to Intro to TypeScript. Hopefully you guys get a bit better after this. Not guaranteeing that though. Anyways, what is TypeScript? It's developed and maintained by Microsoft. You don't need to know all that. This is just a bit of info for you guys if you want. You can have a look at it later on. Alright, let's get to the interesting stuff. Types. So there's two types, basic and other. We'll focus on basic for now. How long have you guys been using JavaScript for?
All my life. Since I was born.
Alright, do you guys know the difference between null and undefined?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Anyone that doesn't know the difference between null and undefined?
Explain.
Weren't you here last time?
No, I didn't.
Alright, so undefined is basically the true null of JavaScript, as when you think of null in like C or Java. Null in JavaScript is basically an object reference pointing to nothing. That's like the main difference. It's kind of weird, but it is also there, and it is two completely different things. And then Boolean, you guys know, number is int in Java or a float, so it's both. You guys know string. Unknown is a new one introduced in TypeScript 4. Can't remember exactly which version. But basically, you kind of use unknown when you don't know the types, but the types get inferred at runtime. So the most likely case you would ever use unknown is the parameter type. So let's say you have like a mouse click event or something, but you don't exactly know for what it is for. So it could be a mouse click event for a button, it could be a mouse click event for an anchor tag. There's a bunch of them. You could use unknown instead, and that'll infer the type for you. Any is basically you're writing JavaScript at that point. You can use any, but use any with a grain of salt because it can cause unknown errors at similar to how JavaScript would run. So yeah, and then there's two other types, big int and symbol, which we won't get into. Big int is for extraordinary large numbers, so think bigger than long in Java. And then symbol is complex type, we won't get into. All right, other. You guys know what arrays are. Do you guys know what objects are? Hopefully, yes? You guys know what functions are? I hope so. And then unions and enums. We'll get into unions in a bit. And then enum is basically, it has to be one of these types and nothing else. I hope you guys kind of know what enums are from like databases and stuff. Yep. If you have any questions, please stop me at any point or raise your hand or whatever. All right. Yeah, all right. So let's get into it. So I have on the left side the correct implementation of TypeScript, and on the right, what not to do kind of thing. We'll go on the left side first, the correct. So I have, for example, const pi is equal to 3.14. Hopefully you guys know what const and let are in JavaScript. All right. So const pi is equal to 3.14. We've initialized the value at declaration. So TypeScript will already infer the value for you, sorry, the type for you, which is number. And so if you never plan on changing that value, in the case of const, you cannot. That value, the type is, you don't need, unnecessarily need to define the type. All right, so that's the first case. Const hours is equal to 24, same thing. Let minutes, so in the second case, so in the third case, in this case, let minutes is type number, and then minutes is equal to 40. Let is immutable, sorry, let is mutable, so you can change the value. And so at the start, because we haven't set a value to minutes, but we need the value afterwards, we set it to type number. And then when we need to, we've assigned a value to minutes. And that's the only reason we would ever need to assign a value, sorry, the type to a variable. Any questions so far? No? All right. And then console logging all of this, you get pi is whatever. All right, let's go the string. Let time is the string of type string, time is equal to minute in quotes, and then console log will give you the minute. Pretty simple stuff. Moving on. Again, I have changed the value of time, but it's still a string, so it follows the types safety check. No questions so far, right? All right. I'm not sure if this will take me to the next page. All right, so the part that will error out now. Let minutes is number, and I've set that the value of minutes can only be number. But then I go on to say minutes is equal to hello world. And as you can see, it's going to cause an error if I have taken a screenshot for you. This is like pretty much my VS Code. I'm sorry if the text is a bit small. I just prefer my text to be tiny. That's a preference. But let minutes is number, is type string is not assignable to type number, and that's the error you'll get in your VS Code. Other IDEs will let you know similar to VS Code while you're typing, because it has a TypeScript server running in the background, or it'll tell you once it's compiled the code. Either way, it'll error out for you. So in a way, this helps reduce bugs. Looking at a report that Airbnb had 3 years ago, something like that, I was looking at a conference talk. The dev team moved from JavaScript to TypeScript for their apps, and they've reduced over 40% of bugs just by moving to TypeScript. That wouldn't have been caught until it's gone to production. So a massive company like Airbnb saving 40% of bugs is a massive win, because that time isn't gone into debugging, and that can be done in like 2 minutes while you're writing the code for it. So I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty useful. All right, let's go into the union types we talked about. So the first one is the OR type. So let value is equal to string or number or null. And so this is when you have a bunch of types that can be set so a bunch of values can be set of different types, but it changes along the way, and you know for a fact it's only ever going to be these types, which is where you would use the OR. So initially I've set the value to null, so let value is equal to string or number or null is equal to null, because I know it's going to be null at the start. I've set it to null. Console logging, that gives me null. Changing the value to 12 is now a number, so console logging a value will give me 12 because it still follows the type. And then the last one is I'm changing it to string, and it'll still work. There's also AND, which we'll get to in the live coding part at the end of it. Any questions so far? No? All right. I hope you guys are getting this, because this is all very important when you guys are hopefully you're writing your code in TypeScript when you do get to that part. All right. Arrays. Good damn it. All right. Just
go back, I think it was highlighted simultaneously on both sides.
Yeah. All right. Const array is equal to hello, comma world, inferred as an array of strings. It's basic stuff here. There's two ways of declaring arrays. You can either go the square brackets, or you can go the angular brackets like you have array lists in Java. To each their own, either works. I have no preferences. Yeah. All right. So let's say you know you have an array of type. It's a mixed type of string and number. I can go array is type string or number, but that's an error. It shouldn't be that. It should instead be.
It's not an array, right? It's just a string.
Yeah, that is an array. That's either a string or a number. So it should be the whole thing array of string or number, or that string or number declared as a type and then that square bracket. That's a mistake on my part. I'll fix it up later on. All right, objects. So when we talk about objects, declaring a type for an object, you think of interfaces, and then an interface is basically defining what the object will look like. So in this case, let's take an example where we're designing a database for UW. We have basic information, so name, age, student number, gender. Yeah, so the main part of note is the age, so age question mark colon number. That can be written as age is number or undefined, as I've written in the comment there. But yeah, that's pretty straightforward, I hope, for what interfaces are. It's basically defining what the object will look like.
Pretty much like a class.
Sorry?
It's like a class.
Yeah, so it's like, it is a class, kinda. All right, so let's declare an object, const student1, type is student, which is the interface, and then gender, student number, whatever, and then gender, male. So those three are required. So if a field is not undefined, it is required. And so if that field is missing, that is not a legal object, and so TypeScript will error out for you. So as you see there, age question mark colon undefined is the non-required type, and so it doesn't have to be there when I've declared the object. Any questions on that so far? Nope. All right, so I can then go on and go student1.age is equal to 21, and that adds age to the object, and so console logging student will give me that. And so that pretty much follows the shape of the interface, which is student. Moving on to inheritance. Hopefully you guys know what inheritance is. Yes, yes. All right, so again, we have the UW student, name, student number, date of birth, gender. All of them look like required fields so far. And then we have interface student club, and which is the name of the club and is the club's guild affiliated. Again, you can see is guild affiliated is question mark colon, so that means it's an optional field. And so let's say this thing was for the student guild. You would need the UW student details to an extent, not everything, but also the required fields for your guild. And so instead of having to create a new interface, what you can do is just create an interface for the fields that are not in the UW student one, and then have it extend. And so with inheritance, you get all the fields of both the UW student and student club. And so if I'm declaring a student as a guild member, which is the interface here, I can get name, student number, date of birth, clubs, whatever. No questions so far, right? Moving on. Functions. Two ways of declaring a function. You can either use the keyword function or you can use arrow functions. So keyword function is on the left, declaring an arrow function is on the right. Let's start it off with the left. Function add num1 type number, num2 type number, open brackets, and then return num1 plus num2. It's fairly obvious. Num1 has been declared as a number, num2 has been declared a number, and so adding two numbers will still give you a number, and so this is already inferred for you by the function. So you do not need to declare a type, it will do it for you. Same thing, I've pretty much written the same thing on the right as an arrow function. I prefer using arrow functions. I don't know about you guys.
You still return it now in the arrow function.
That is returned. So that's shorthand. Yeah, so that is returned by shorthand. So const add, I'll get into that since you've got. So const add is equal to num1 type number, num2 type number, and then equal to, and then greater than sign is the arrow, because it looks like an arrow, which is why it's called an arrow function. And then when you have the values in the parentheses, it is return. It is a shorthand instead of having to type that on the left. So this is the shorthand. So you do not have to type return the two types. Instead, what you can do is just the parentheses, and it's shorthand. I prefer using this if I don't need to type return. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know about the shorthand.
Yeah. So like if you see in some of my code examples,
Just a
if I
simple calculation there, yeah, you can do that.
Yeah.
There's more stuff. Probably
yeah.
more-
So if you have no logic before the return,
Yeah.
you can just do that.
Okay.
And so that's like very much shorthand. Okay, and then on the left side, we have subtract. So returns type by force. So in this case, in a way, it's good to have the types declared. So function subtract num1, num2, return num1 minus num2. So we know that subtraction of two numbers is going to be number. But let's say in the future, you change your function. So instead of accepting numbers as the parameters, you take an object as a parameter. So let's say you pass in, like as the previous example, we had age or something like that as part of the UW student object. So if you pass in the object, we can and subtract just the ages of two different students or something. The type is still a number, and actually that's a pretty bad example to talk about this. It's good practice to have the return types so that in the event that your return types changes in the future accidentally because of an API change or something, you know for a fact that it'll error out for you and it'll give you an error right there, rather than going into production and then
You know where the error is.
yeah.
Yeah. It happens.
So it's good practice, but it's not required. But I'd say for now, do it, and then if it'll save you in the long run. And it's just left and the right is just two different ways of declaring return types of functions. All right, moving on. Actually, here. So to answer your question, John, this is the longhand.
Yeah.
So you see how like
the long one. Yeah.
yeah. So I put both just to show you how it goes. And so if you type in the keyword return, you have to have the curly braces. But if you don't want and you just have the logic, you can just do parentheses and the logic inside. All right, let's go into advanced types. This can get a bit confusing, so feel free to let me know if you have any confusions. I've picked the ones that you'd be using the most. Aiken, you use TypeScript a lot. Are there any types that I mentioned here that you don't use? And so you use that aren't mentioned here?
That I use or
That you use?
That I use record a lot. Type of key of, partial,
Yeah,
pick.
yeah.
That's like the most common ones I use, so yeah.
Yeah, so like this is literally like, I don't know, I created the slides a year ago, so I don't remember exactly what the slides are. But anyways, this is the most, like from what I've used, these are all the ones from the advanced types that I've used. If there are a lot more, and you can have a look at it on the TouchScript handbook there. But yeah, let's get into it. I'll be getting into like the thing in the live workshop because it's easier to explain then. So let's get started with React with TypeScript. React itself is not written in TypeScript. It is written by Flow, and Flow is also a Facebook open source typing language. So the TypeScript types for React are maintained by the community, which is quite surprising, given that TypeScript is more used than Flow is. All right, for the sake, and then there's also two types, React with hooks and React classes. React with classes is the older way of doing things. Ever since hooks was released, the syntax is more terse. At least I feel like I'm writing less code with hooks. All right. So the most common things you'd be using in React are useState, useRef, useContext, and component and prop declaration. Is there anything else I missed?
Use effect?
You don't declare types in useEffect.
Oh, I mean, you can.
Alright.
You can set your state on it. I don't know.
All right, so here's an example of React with a TypeScript, and we'll go with it by line by line. So import React, useState, useContext, useRef from React, and then I've declared a component. For now, just assume that it is just const component as react.fc equal to props, open bracket, then return a value, and then close, and then with React, you always have to export the component. So either export default or export const, but then the way you import them is different. I prefer using export default, that's just my preference. All right, so let's say we have to declare a state. So useState, so const state, set state. Have you guys gotten into states so far with React? All right, how far have you guys gotten into React? You guys were there for you.
I mean, React for React.
All right, how many people of you are new to React? 1, 2, 3, 4. Have you guys gotten into use states like the hooks yet? Yes? Yeah? Have you gotten into hooks? Yeah? How about you guys? Have you gotten into hooks? No? I'm looking at her. Yes, thank you, Jen.
Were you talking to me?
I'm sorry to her.
Oh, sorry. You're looking at me, man.
She's right next to you. All right. So here we have const state, set state is equal to use state, hello. So you usually use state because the way React works is if a value changes, it'll re-render the component. I just realized that talking about the specifics of React will confuse you, so let's forget about that. So let's say you want a value and you want it to be persistent. So this is a value you know that is required for the component. So let's say something like a username. There's a state before the person is logged in and there's a state after the person is logged in. So let's say before the person is logged in, the name of the person is undefined. After the person is logged in, the name is whatever the person's name is. Similarly, that's like a basic scenario when you would use state. So in this case, let's say useState is equal to, you set the state to hello. So the value state is set to hello, and then set state is the function that changes the state. And if you guys don't know, that is array destructuring. Do you guys know what destructuring is?
Yep,
Yeah?
I do.
She's giving you a face. I assume that's a no. We'll get to that in the live coding session. Don't worry about that. But for now, assume that the first element in the array is the value state. The second element in the array is value set state. And that's all you need to know for now. And so, because it's a basic type of string, the useState will automatically set for you the type of state as string. Let's now declare a second type of const user set user is, and now this is a complex type, which we're assuming that there is this interface called user props from this library that you set up. Unfortunately, I do not have that with me, but you'll see a lot of this in the code base for Foodbank, where we've declared the types for a global object elsewhere, and we're importing it in the code. But for now, let's assume that user props has a shape. I think it might be the one with the interfaces. Nope, my bad. All right, let's move forward. Assume there's an interface called user props, and so in TypeScript, if you want to declare a type, you just go type the type name or the variable name. So in this case, type name is equal to user props or null. So again, I'm using union type, so it's one value or the other, not both. It can never be both. It is one or the other. And so the way to set a value to a complex, so the way to set a type in a use state is by declaring as in the angular brackets between the use state and the initial declaration. So right there, as you can see. And then if you ever need to use a ref, hopefully, actually you wouldn't know what a ref is because you hardly use it. But in the future, if you ever need to use a ref, actually I'll just explain what a ref is. So in JavaScript, to get the access to a form element, let's say an input, and you have username and password, let's say you want to do validation for the password field. In JavaScript, in basic JavaScript, you'd go document.get element by ID, and then whatever so if the ID of the input field for password is set to password, you go document.get element by ID password, and then that will give you access to the value of whatever you need to do for the password input. In the case of React, you do not have access to that, and so React gives you a function called a ref, which would do that for you. Hopefully that answers what a ref is, if you don't know. You gave me a thumbs up, but like you already know all this. I need to get validation from people who don't.
Keep going.
All right. So in the case of the use ref, similar to use state, is between the keyword and the parentheses. So in this case, I want to use the ref on the div for whatever reason. It is HTML div element in React. So if you're using it on a span, it'll go HTML span element. On an input, it'll go HTML input element. There's a bunch of them. All right. And then the third type is context. So context is kind of like a global state within that part. So if I've declared a context around a certain area, anywhere in that area, I can get access to the value. Do you guys understand the term by local and global state? Yeah. Okay, assuming you guys did Java and you remember local and global. Do you remember what local and global state is? And I forgot his name. Farah? Sorry?
Rupert?
Yes, Rupert. I'm sorry. All right, do you know what local and global state is?
Roughly.
Okay, tell me what local and global state is.
Oh, okay.
I gotta ask you guys questions so I know.
Okay, local state is like you have properties for that given state, but local is more like if you have an object and maybe like the state is within that object would be considered local. Is that
I get what you're trying to say, but it's not really. So for global, it is available throughout any part of that file or section.
yeah.
Anywhere in it, it is available. So if you've declared a global in a certain file, or on top, like for example, if you've declared hash define in C, it is available throughout the entire project. For local, it is if you've declared a value inside a function, it's only available inside that function. Yes.
Is that similar to like Unjay, how you have public and private, I guess, functions?
Yes and no. So Java is a bit. Is this your first year?
Yeah.
Okay. So for right now, yes, that works. So public is it's available throughout every part of it, and then private is only to that class. Because you're first year, I'll let you slide in that definition, but it's not really correct. Yeah. When do you do systems next year?
Yeah, next year.
Okay, so hopefully when Chris does it trial by fire, you guys understand then. But anyways, for now, yeah. for now, that if that makes sense to you, go for it.
If you were talking about a class, then yeah, the private would be a local variable. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So she's talking in terms of classes.
Cool.
All right. Moving on. So that's what the context is, and the way to declare the context is a provider, so a part that gives you the value, and then there's going to be the use context hook which gets the value. In this case, that is not how it's meant to be defined, but this is just meant for explanation, so we'll let that slide. But anyways, so I want to provide to any part of the user the value of the user, and I want to change the value of the user if need be. So this is really helpful in the case of like you have the entire app, but you also have the nav bar. You only ever want to change the value in terms of feedback I'm talking. You only ever want to change the value of state in the nav bar because that's where you're changing the username on the top right. I don't know, have you guys seen the mocks that Ash has? Where is Ash? But yeah, basically you guys get the idea. For most apps where you're logging in like Gmail or whatever, the top is like sign in, sign out, where the state of the user is set to null. Once you've logged in, it has the user information like first name, last name, email, all that stuff. You get the general idea, right? Okay, so again, value, I'm passing it as an object, so user is user and set user, passing in both. Okay, and then, like I mentioned there, not valid React code, but for learning purposes, that is how you get the value of the context. So use data, use context, user context. And then the user context is the context value from the provider. Do I have it?
You took up line 23.
Yes, so line 23, const user data is equal to use context of user context, and then the user context is declared on line 11. Export const user context is equal to react.create context of user context props, and then user and set user. It's been a year since, and I know that for a fact that set user type is wrong. And React has a type defined for it. It is set state action dispatch something, I can't remember. But
would you use user data or user inside your component?
for what are you talking?
Because don't those both get the user? So the user context provider,
Yeah.
that gets the user object, but also the use context.
No, the user context provider provides the value of user and set user throughout the internal part.
Okay, and then what does user data do?
Where is user data?
23.
Oh, so that is meant to be used like, suppose you have like a children component.
Yeah.
Okay, you can pass it.
Yeah, so that's where you would use it. For the purpose of this example, I've put it all in one file, but that is not how you meant to handle it.
Okay, yeah, I get you. Right.
And I'll get to that once we've got into like the live coding part, but that is wrong, but also I put it all in one file to make it easy to explain. Any questions so far? No? All right. And so that is the entire file. Actually, this is the type of the set user, so React dispatch, set state. Yeah, anyways. Live coding time, yay.
Let's go.
Just waiting for that. What? All right, assuming. So this is like the basic thing for Next.js that I've been using. Hopefully, a lot of this will translate over to when you're writing your components. But for now, let's look at the structure. I'll run through the basic Next.js stuff. So there's there's a folder components where you're meant to put like all the custom components that you built. For now, I've just called them button.tsx and textfield.csx. And the index is basically importing and exporting them. But I've renamed them as well. Yeah, any questions about just these two lines? And we'll get into logic of buttons and text field in a bit. All right, moving on. So let's get into button, const button, props, and then return button, and then props of children, blah blah. So we haven't declared types yet, but basic JavaScript this would work. So again, I'll talk to you guys about destructuring because some of you didn't know what it was. So, all right, let's get into array destructuring. God damn it. All right, let's get back into it. So once I've logged in, it's actually running the TypeScript server, and so you can see this red squiggly line telling me that my types are wrong. Or for now, it's using any, and it shouldn't because that's usually bad practice. But I'll still run it anyways because it's a dev mode and we aren't running it as strict version. Anyways, let's get into explaining what array destructuring is. It's fine. All right. Let's assume we have an array. For now, it's just an array of numbers, but you get the point across. First value is 1, second value is 2, third value is 3, and so on. Let's say you only ever want the first two values. In that case, you can go val1 So we have val1, val2 from array, and so that'll give us the value of 1 and 2, and if we console log, whoops. Why isn't it logging? Good old debugging in live demo. What? No, I'm in the console.
Is the button component?
Oh yeah. It is there.
That looks like the default button, actually.
It is a default button. Like I literally have I have nothing declared here, and yeah. Or I'll just move it here to see if that works. Okay, that just isn't working. I'll just do it in the console.
Okay, pizza with that important. I feel sick.
Right, so const array is equal to and so this is the console logging of array, and you can see the values of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I go and then go, as you can see, val1 is value 1, and if I go val2 is value 2. Any questions on that so far? So that's destructuring, basically. This is my array. I've gotten the first value, which is 1 there, value 2 there, and you get the idea, so on and so forth. But what if I still need the values of the rest of them? I can't do that now, but so if I go so now I have variable 1, variable 2, and then dot dot rest. This is called the spread operator, and it's basically saying assign the first value, the first index, value of the first index to var1, value of the second index to var2, and then whatever is remaining in the array to rest. That's basically the spread operator. And so if I go or 1, you can see it's still value 1. And then if I go rest, you can see it's an array of 3, 4, 5. You guys understand spreads and array destructuring? So that's basically what I've been doing in Button. Yeah.
What if you spread the last, let's say you spread one number?
Yeah.
In the array, would it be a number?
So you're saying like,
So
if I get to the point where it's var4 and then it's just 5 remaining, and then I go dot dot dot,
Yeah.
it'll be an array of 5. So array and then 5, it's just 5 in there. Yep. Regarding that question, let's see what happens when I do 1, 2, and then so we know for a fact that v1 will be 1 and v2 will be 2, but what happens with RE? Take a guess. Empty array. Any other guesses? No? Undefined? So the choices we had are empty array and undefined. Anything else? No? Alright. RE is empty array. So you guys get the idea of array destructuring, right? That is what we use for the set state, as you would see.
Sorry, Jerry, can I interrupt?
Yes.
How long is it going to continue this work?
Probably like another 10 minutes. Yeah. I'm sorry if I'm keeping you from pizzas, but this is also important. What? Actually, you can go grab a pizza if there is, and then come back here. Yeah, you can do that. Yeah, probably go get pizzas and we'll start back on this. All right. So we've talked about array destructuring. So now we can also do that for objects. So let's say, for example, we have an object. Name. All right. So let's say, for example, we have an object, obj, with the properties name and age, and name is John Doe and age is 20.
Cold.
Yes, I know.
There you go.
All right. We have an object name, whatever. Okay. So now let's say, suppose like this was the data we got from an API, and we only ever needed age for that part. What we can do is is equal to obj, and then if we go age, you see it's 20. You guys get the idea of object destructuring now? Yep. So array destructuring is the variables where they declared in the indices, and object destructuring is you have to get the property out of the object. Similar thing with spreads is you can go because I've already declared age, I can rename the variable. So let's call it what do I call this? Yeah, okay. Person age. And then I can go dot rest is equal to bj. And then if I go rest is an object with name, with the property name. So it's similar to array destructuring, but this is object destructuring. Do you guys understand that as the basics of destructuring? This destructuring and spread operators are used a lot in the code base. So make sure you understand how these work. Yeah? All right. So moving back to TypeScript, which we've deviated from. First, we'll talk about the Next.js components. So components that we declare in the individual components pages are the routes. So index is the home page, and then about is /about. So if I restarted this, I need to refresh the browser. Take a bit of time, but yeah, so this is a link. If I go to about, I don't think there's anything. Yeah, so /about. So you see how that route is the exact same thing as the name of the file. That's how routing works in Next.js. And then this is just Next.js config. Package.json is the dependencies you have installed in the project. TS-config is the requirements for the TypeScript declaration. And then the unlock is the dependencies and sub-dependencies required by the project. All right, getting back into the TypeScript aspect of it. If we go back to index. So we remove this. All right. So we have, for this instance, we have text field and button. as part of a form, button with type equal to submit, and text field. So if I declare this as, does this work? Okay. Instead of that, I declare it as this. This is the HTML button that you guys know of. But let's say, for example, I'm building a component button, but I also need all the properties of button. So let's go back. So this is like the component I've built button, which is here. Pretty much the way you can differentiate components from HTML is the casing. So this is Pascal case, so it starts off with a capital, and then every subsequent field in spaces is a capital letter. So Pascal casing, I've declared button, type is equal to submit. This is a property in the HTML button. And then hello. So to the button here, this and here, the hello is called the children. Do you guys understand that? So you gave me a weird look.
Why is it called which one?
Okay, so you know how we talk about ancestry in parent and child?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So when you talk about children, like in HTML, this is called like the parent element, and then this is the child of the parent. So you understand like that logic, right? Yep. So text field is a child of this div, button is a child of this div, and button is a sibling of text field. Okay? You guys get that logic? Okay, so hello is the child of button. So I go, and now these are called the attributes of the component. So type is an attribute, and for now we have nothing else. All right, let's go to text field first, because that's the first component. Does this have any formatting? Nope. Okay, so the basic thing, const text field props is the input, and then, like I said, the spread operator, used a lot, very important. And to declare the types, oops, right, so let's say interface text field props, extends Alright, so this is just the error of I've declared but never used, and because I've configured TypeScript, the ESLint to be I need to use everything I declare. Let's go and use it. So does it autocomplete for me? Yep. Text field props. Now this is erroring out because I didn't do the correct thing. So HTML, what is this? If you're ever in doubt, this kind of tells you what the props are. So HTML input HTML attributes of HTML input element. So attributes. This is going a bit off the screen. Sorry about that. Let's reduce the size of this a bit. Okay. So interface text field props extends input HTML attributes, HTML input element. So basically what this is saying is I'm going to declare custom props, but I also want everything else that is declared in the basic input element. You guys understand that? This is a React property, which is why I'm importing from here. And then HTML input thing is a node type, which it doesn't say that. Anyways, but I hope you guys understand this so far. And now let's say I have a property called, give me ideas, Drew.
No, sorry.
All right, let's make this an interactive workshop. All of you can.
Constant equals 0.
What?
Constant equals 0.
Bruh.
You said variable name.
I said properties.
Oh, property?
Properties,
Oh,
I can give one. Is Pokemon.
there
Bruh.
you go.
That's not a text. That's more like
How about briefing?
greeting.
I was paying attention, but
Yeah.
Search
message.
text. There you go.
Or message.
Search.
Okay, so let's do message. Ideally it's string. Anything else?
we do like a checkbox, or is this only?
So this is every input, but for now we're just restricting it to text fields.
MMR is just a number.
MMR is just a number.
Or like address or something.
What do you mean by address?
You could say like that's where it's going to be sent. Like maybe it's their email. Maybe it's bringing their email.
Come here and help.
No, we can't.
Shit. All right. Message and this is hard. Huh?
Nothing unusual. Label?
Is one K.
All right. So let's say I have two added properties, message and isPhone. Message can be thought of as like a description. So we only ever want this to be rendered when we have message. So in this case, let's modify this. And then you go message. And if you go control space, ideally it shows us the properties that we can access. So here's one. These are like literally all the properties that are available in the HTML input attributes. But okay, it's a very long thing.
So we're looking for is.
Oh my god, it's not showing. This is alright, anyways, I'm just gonna type it out. What?
It was at the very top.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh. Oh, I'm blind. Anyways. Okay, so now we've extracted message, isPhone using object destructuring, setting the rest of it to props as is with spread operator, like we've talked about just before. And so we only ever want the span to render if we have a message. And so this is how you do an if statement in React. with just using like, yeah, this is not ternary. No. This is just the and. So you guys know how if statements work, right? Statement and. So this is like, so this checks if message is true. So if message is not an empty string, or not null, or not undefined, or any of the other faulty values, it renders this property. So span so input message, and we can test it out. So over here, I've set everything to be required, which is why it's erroring out. So, like we've talked about before, putting a question mark sets it to be optional. And if I say that and go back, and now the problem is fixed because it's not a required property, and so it satisfies the type check. All right, now let's go. Message is equal to, for the sake of Jun.
Yes. Thank you.
As you can see, it renders, but we haven't styled it, so it looks terrible. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want a website that looks like this.
It will load pretty fast.
Functionality over design.
Yeah.
Okay, so so this is another feature from React I've been using. It's called Fragments. Basically, what it's saying is, because React requires you to return a single component. So in this case, everything inside one parent is considered a single component. It follows React's design principle. Now, for example, if we comment it out, you see how this is erroring out because it says unreachable code, but it's also, this isn't valid JSX. But it's giving you the wrong ESLint error, which is weird. Anyways, let's undo that. But we also need to style it, so let's go div style is equal to display flex, and then flex direction is com. And as you can see, this is kind of the layout you want, where this shows below the input.
Insane.
What?
That's insane. I've used it.
Sorry, what? Tell me what.
I'm just saying it's cool how you did that.
Oh, okay. It's just using style, display flex, and then have you guys used Flexbox Froggy?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so that's a good website to teach you how Flexbox works. Highly recommend. This is a good resource for you guys to learn how Flexbox works. Display flex. And yeah, use this if you don't understand how Flex works. But for now, I know how Flex works. And it took me 2 months to master it. So yeah, that was fun. Working full time and learning how to do this as well. Anyways, okay, so now, that highlights message, but what happens when we need to use is phone. So what we can do is another one. We don't have any classes. Shit. What? Control V. And then we go. And actually, I don't need that. Okay, and so if we go back to this, add is phone. So for booleans, I can just do this, and that means it's true if the default is false. But if the default is false, I need to set it to true. I will need to do this. Right? So there's two ways. If the default is false, and I need to set it to true, is just this. But if the default is true and I need to set it to false, would be that. Yep?
Yep.
Let's move on. Is phone, and you see how +61 is now prepended to the text box. So hopefully that gives you guys an idea of how interfaces extending HTML input attributes and custom properties would work. Any questions on this so far? No? Okay. So, let's also put in a default thing. So placeholder equal to Jun, you get a shout out in my.
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, what?
In this case, we'll comment this out. So Jun's MMR, what is your MMR?
6K.
Oh yes. So yeah, you guys get the basic idea of how properties work, right? So that's for text fields. So in the case of buttons, it's showing here as type any, but if you hover on button, you'd see it goes button attribute, pretty much just copy this, Control C. You aren't adding anything else, so you can just go okay, it still wants it. Okay. For the purpose of this, I'm not going to bother styling this, but you guys get the idea, right? Okay. Let's move on to talking about context and stuff. So use state. So
Every time you press hello, it goes down by 30.
Sorry, what?
Every time you press hello, it just goes -30.
Yeah, man. All right. Let's set the default to 2,000.
Is that yours?
Most people are 2K.
Yeah, is that yours or you want to?
No, I'm 2.5.
Oh wow, I thought you were worse, honestly.
Anyways, moving on. This isn't us talking about other people's.
We don't MMR shame.
Yeah. I haven't imported this, which is why it's erroring out. So it auto imports for me. So I've set a value of MMR here and then set MMR. And so what I can do is, I'm not using that anymore. Value is equal to and so this is how you would use a variable, and so you see it's automatically set to 2,000. But if I'm using a context, I can go, let's do it here. All right, what is the syntax for declaring context? No. Sorry? No. The provider, what is the syntax for that?
The context component, context dot provide. Something dot provide context.
Yeah. And how would you go about creating that?
You wrap it around. First you import the component.
Nope, you need to create the context first, right?
Oh yeah.
So how do you create a context?
Isn't it like create context components?
Yep.
Yeah.
So const
He just cleaned it up.
create context. An argument for default value. Default value can be MR. And then this would be var, comma. Okay, I'm not following the syntax.
Yeah, it's slightly
Is okay, so what would be the type for the context? For this, let's call it sorry, what's her name? Julia? Sorry? Yeah, okay.
I don't know this one.
Whatever. Julia, how would I declare the props for these? Sorry, the types for these. So I've declared what the object is going to look like, which is here. So there's this, and then there's this. So what are the types for both of those? Come on, you can try.
Can I have a try?
No.
Why are you picking on people?
No, it's... Okay, so let's go with MMR. What is the type of MMR?
Number.
As you can see here.
Yeah, zero.
Okay, so 0 is... What is the type of 0? Number, exactly. This one is a bit hard, so I won't let you do that.
Dispatch provider context.
Yes, so for you guys, if you don't exactly know what the types are, you can just hover over it and tell you here. Dispatch, set action. Oh,
Jeremiah,
yeah.
why did you use context instead?
Where? Here?
Yeah, like what's
Okay, so the idea for this is I'm going to have like this thing here, and I'm also going to have two buttons which adds and decreases context. So the idea is the text field only gets the value, but then the buttons increment or decrement the value. So you get the idea? And I'm showing you how context works in that case. Okay. So I don't want to import them, so I'll just go React.dispatch. React dot, and then you come back here. It'll tell you set state action. See, set state action, and then this is number, and this is erroring out because it's not used. So
I'm gonna submit a request for you to look at the pull
oh, okay. That needs to refresh. Oh. And then for this, what?
We're good friends, right?
Yeah. Add.
I praise his knowledge, his wisdom in switching to experience.
So this is erroring out because I don't have a type yet. So let's go on and do that. So this is one, but I'm also wanting to add a type, so I can just go here and do this. So if you guys don't know, this is also a union type. So previously we talked about or. Here there's and. So it's basically saying I want all the attributes that are inside button, and I'm adding another element to it. So it's combining two interfaces. Yep. For now, let's just leave it at that, and we'll come back to it in a bit. This is erroring out now because it's required, so I'll just do optional. Okay. Yep. So we have that. And then now we go to button and we modify. Okay. Rupert, how do we... Actually, no, you wouldn't know this. Drew, how do you get context?
You use the context.
Okay.
And then you use the destructuring to grab the MMR. Yeah.
Const.
Destructure array. Or is it destructure object?
Object.
Okay. Oh yeah, because
Use context.
you gotta import it.
Did I export this? Control X. So ideally, you would have your context in another file, but for the sake of this, I'm just putting it here. And then where is it? I haven't imported it. Why is it not importing? I'm actually not going to be using MMR, so I'll just change this back to this. Okay, so I've changed what context looks like, and so I no longer need to destructure it. And now I can't find MMR context. So export const. I'll just move to a new file. Folder, utils. This is taking too long. Hopefully, this gets it now. Yep. All right. So now we've gotten the context. What we want to do is on click of this button, it adds MMR, and on subtract, it reduces the value. So what we can do is an on-click. So, all right, how would you go about doing this, Jim?
I wasn't really paying attention. I just fixed the thing. That's all.
Okay, how would you go about doing this now?
So what are we trying to do? Add.
So you're creating the function for add.
Yeah.
Run me through the process of adding.
Well, you want to update the context of the MMR variable. That's all I have.
Yes, but how would you go about doing it?
You curly bracket things for the MMR. Wait, are you updating the actual thing within the text box? Like the number within the text box when you click add? Will it
Yeah.
Okay.
So how would I do that?
Is that just set MMR? Yeah.
Set MMR is, so there's a hidden thing in set MMR where you can get the previous value inside it. So you can go,
Just add. Now plus 20 because we're a team.
okay. And then same thing can be subtract. See. Actually, let's just do it as one. On change. It's previous, let's use a ternary. Okay. So from this, let's extract. Does it become the first one? Add. So add is true, returns previous plus 20, it's false, previous minus 20. You guys get the idea behind that?
It's like
Yep. Huh?
No. It's like that if else. Like,
Why is this still erroring? Okay. And then the on change is equal to on change. Sorry, this is on click. Okay, and now hopefully this works. So if I press add,
nice.
and that's context. You guys understood that?
Yes.
Yeah? And that's pretty much the end of it.